Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Corley, a marketing technologist on Sitecore's SBOSS consulting team. In this presentation, it's about experience optimization and the effect of testing within the Sitecore platform. In the next half hour, we'll look closely at the experience optimization features in Sitecore and how to conduct both content and personalization tests. I'll share a few stories of recent Sitecore customers and how they leveraged experience optimization capabilities, what they tested and what they learned. We'll also explore how testing can become part of the mindset of a marketing team. And I hope you walk away with a better understanding of the experience optimization capabilities that are available in Sitecore, and that some of these customer cases inspire you to use similar tactics on other websites. Let's get started with a few basic testing principles and how to pave the way for Sitecore testing. The concept of experience optimization is simple, and a short definition that I like to use in workshops is with experience optimization, you show different experiences of your website to different people and learn what drives engagement the best. So if you want to know which version of a call to action is the absolute best, there's really only one way to know for certain, and testing is built right into the experience editor. In Sitecore, you can optimize your content by testing in a variety of ways, from simple A/B component tests to multivariate personalization tests. And we'll look at a few real-world scenarios in a few minutes, but from left to right here, you've got component tests. That's just a single component that you're testing. You have content tests, where you're comparing different versions of the same page. You've got page tests, where you're actually substituting one page for a different page in the content tree. And these first three options are single variable tests. You'll hear me use the term A/B testing interchangeably for this type of test. But Sitecore also facilitates multiple variable tests. And today we'll also explore how to launch tests on personalization or personalized components and when to use multivariate tests. But in general, testing allows marketers to fine-tune content on your site to better drive increased conversions. On the Launchpad experience optimization tool, it shows an overview of active tests that are currently running across your site, along with which internal users are leading the testing effort. Here you'll also find a list of suggested tests by the system that's based on potential and impact of pages. But in the experience editor, that's where you're actually creating your content tests. So you're starting and launching them there. And you can also access the test results once they're in progress. So a little background on engagement value, or how to measure success with the experience optimization initiatives. I thought we'd start with the engagement value scale. Before starting any tests, it's really important to clearly define the goals or how you're measuring the success across your site. Otherwise, it's pretty tempting to focus on some of these vanity metrics, like page views per session, which they may seem impressive, but they don't exactly matter regarding what your organization is trying to achieve. So SBOSS has released a few ebooks or white papers on this topic, but in a nutshell, the strategic objectives framework, it maps your high-level initiatives down to the digital goals on your site. And within this context, goals in Sitecore are activities that a user can perform on your site that are moving him closer to those marketing objectives. A few good examples here are register for newsletter, request pricing, or request a white paper. Often when beginning to compile your goals, I'll see things like viewing the About Us page or a simple page view goal. And that doesn't really show much commitment from the user side. I tend to remove the About Us type goal. We also see the watch short video goal. That's kind of on the fence. Watching a video doesn't show quite as much user engagement as some of the other goals here. So I like to pull the page view base goals, where it's just a simple page view off of the scale. We'll leave watch short video for now, but with a list of goals across your site, you can assign different weight or different scores that are weighted to each of those goals, and that makes up your engagement value scale. And you can think of the EVS as a special lens that allows you to measure what's driving engagement and producing bottom line results, not just what's attracting more visits. So Sitecore is built to optimize pages and components based on the goals you define and their associated weight. So it's important to get this set up correctly on the front end. And really all the upcoming test strategies and processes rest on conversions that are measured across a well-defined scale of engagement value. All right, let's explore a few concepts and customer examples that illustrate the approach to experience optimization. And then we'll shift gears a bit and look at how to actually launch tests in the Sitecore platform. But the hardest part of testing, in my opinion, is determining exactly what to test across your site. And low-hanging fruit, it's often quickly or hastily designed pages with high traffic and a clear conversion goal. Testing or content tests can typically be organized into one of two buckets that are aimed at either refinement or exploration, where refinement involves just fine-tuning the existing content that's on your site to identify the highest performing variant. And exploration, that's more about introducing different alternatives that may not resemble the current site and trying to find entirely new ways to drive conversions. Here's a recent customer example of refinement. This is One&Only's homepage. One&Only is a luxury hotel brand with different properties around the globe, and each destination tile on their homepage is a different resort. Their context marketing team was focused on refining these 3 promotional blocks on the homepage, and initially the team wanted to personalize and test the first destination tile on the far left. But based on testing, we started to notice that the center block was always outperforming content in that far left block. Users seemed to focus on the central imagery instead of scanning left to right. And this really informed our testing and personalization strategy moving forward. We're currently running personalization that changes these destination blocks based on resort pages that have been viewed in the past. I think an old and exaggerated story about the great Yankee catcher really illustrates the framing effect well. But when Yogi Berra walked into a New York pizzeria, he was asked if he'd like his pizza cut into 4 slices or 8. And Yogi replied, "Better make it 4 slices. I'm not hungry enough to eat 8. It's funny because hardly anyone would think the same amount of pizza would be any less filling cut into 4 big slices or 8 small slices. Psychologists have consistently demonstrated that the tiniest change in how a question is worded or how an option is described can really alter how it's understood and therefore how people respond. This concept is called the framing effect, and it's well studied in fields like psychology or economics, but it's also one of the most powerful concepts that you can use to shape test strategy as marketers. In short, it's the idea that different ways of presenting the same information will evoke different emotional reactions. Here's my favorite example of the framing effect. Imagine that the US is preparing for the outbreak of a disease that's expected to kill 600 people. You've got 2 alternate treatment programs that have been proposed to combat the disease. The first one will save 200 lives, And the second one is estimated that there's a 33% chance of saving all 600 people and a 66% chance of saving no one. So when a group of people were asked to pick between these two, 72% of that group chose treatment A. Now, they brought a second set of people in and introduced them to the treatment plan at the bottom, where treatment A, 400 people will die, and treatment B, there's a 33% chance that no one will die, but a 66% chance that all 600 people will die. And in this case, only 22% of the group chose treatment A. Now, in reality, these two statements or treatment plans express the exact same concept, but the former seems a bit more reassuring. For further reading on this study and a variety of other examples, check out Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a book by Daniel Kahneman. But framing has a lot of practical applications in marketing, and you can use this technique while developing test hypotheses. Here's a recent customer example of framing. Atlantis The Palm is a luxury hotel that's in Dubai, and they ran a splash sale this spring for their water park. It was a great chance to optimize the special offers page. So the context marketing team launched an A/B test to compare the same exact offers with a variance of percentage versus dollar amounts. And what they found was the percentage discount actually drove a 5% lift in the goal they were measuring in marine water park ticket confirmation, and a 7% overall lift in experience effect. Dollywood is it's a theme park in Tennessee, and here they're promoting their season pass offer in orange. I know it's small and tough to see there, but the offer for the season pass says purchase today before the offer ends, but they also created 4 other variants. So they created prices go up soon, offer ends January 3rd, and prices go up after January 3rd. And language is so easily tweaked in Sitecore, it's an obvious place to start with testing. So they launched a test here, and what they found was the prices go up after January 3rd was the winning variant, and it actually outperformed the original or default content by 21%, and even outperformed the second place variant by 9.76%. Less is more. So this example is actually based on another platform. I think it's on Optimizely, and it's a bit dated, but I think the concept is an important one. In 2010, there was an earthquake in Haiti, and a couple former presidents immediately established the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund to raise money and relief support for the victims. And the donation form, it included optional fields for phone number and title. They were there for use down the road, but at the time the foundation was stretched so thin with a lot going on that they weren't actually calling anyone. And their team hypothesized that if they got rid of the 2 optional phone number and title fields, it may outweigh the value of potentially using that data in the future. Here's the second variant. It's tough to see, but they did remove the 2 optional fields, and just by reducing the amount of fields in the form, it drove an 11% improvement in conversions. So sometimes the winning experience is actually one with removed components. And when you're asking a user to take some sort of an action, every bit of effort counts. So I think it's important also to test the user experience and not only the content. So we talked a lot about single variable tests, but let's look for a minute at multivariate tests. These compare all the possible combinations of experiences. So up top we've got 3 different variants of a hero. There's also 3 variants of a call to action. So if you run a multivariate test, what that's doing is measuring the effect of every possible combination between those. And these experiences multiply exponentially. So you can imagine how fast they would add up if you introduced one more component or a few more variables to one of the existing components. Often, the results of multivariate tests mirror winners from individual component tests. And to get started, I recommend beginning with just one component at a time. You've got multivariate tests that require a lot more traffic to reach any sort of a confidence level, just because of the exponentially increasing number of experiences. But that being said, interaction effects can exist between different components on a page, and Sitecore makes it really easy to launch multivariate tests. So it's a really powerful capability within the experience optimization. And finally, I think it's really important to test recent changes. So if you've just made a content change, maybe to imagery or to some of the copy on a page, it can be built right into the workflow to create a test then and there. So in this way, you're incrementally testing the site as you're making updates. Let's shift gears and take a look at launching tests within the Sitecore platform. And then we'll focus on the Sitecore test results dialog and how to measure success. We can start in the experience editor to launch a new component test. So here we're viewing a page, and we've currently selected a component, the hero carousel on that page. And on the floating toolbar, you can select the Test a Component button. This is going to launch a dialog where you can introduce new variations of a component. So you've got the original at the bottom. And it looks like we've configured a CEO hero carousel up top. Now, the main entry point into content testing for content authors in Sitecore is through workflow. And that may require a bit of setup by developers on the front end. But this diagram shows the sample workflow it's shipped out of the box in Sitecore, along with all the other workflows, and it highlights the relevant parts for content testing. So notice someone creates a draft and they submit it for approval. You've got this approve with test or approve without test option. So most sites have a custom content approval workflow that's in place. It's best to merge the current workflow with this sample workflow or with those testing actions. And that way it matches the compliance steps that you're used to, but it's also going to provide the flexibility to launch tests on pages in the future. So here's what that workflow would look like. It shows up in an info bar at the top of the page. And here it's alerting you of a test that's in draft mode, and you're prompted to create a test. Selecting that will launch the Start Test dialog. And I like to start on the Variables tab. So you'll have a table that contains every component on that page with different variants. In this case, you only have one component, the page header media carousel, that has the two variations we create. But if there were other components in the list, I would deselect the other ones and just focus on testing this page header carousel component. We also have exposure set to 100%, which means that all traffic will be exposed to the test. On the Objectives tab, you can select a test objective. By default, it's trailing value per visit, but you could also choose any specific goal within the marketing control panel. Here you can set the duration for a test. And once you start a test, the Optimization tab that's up in the toolbar will have this red dot next to it. That indicates that there's an active test, and this test result button also becomes active. Now, as you move through the site and convert goals, Sitecore calculates a value per visit metric, and you see this all throughout Experience Analytics. In this example, if a user visits your site and converts the subscription goal worth 10 points and the download goal worth 25 points, then the value of this visit is 35. But what if you decide you wanted to optimize the category page by launching an A/B test? Here, you would have two different variants of the category page, and Sitecore automatically splits traffic between the two experiences when a test is running. So, user that was exposed to variant B here went on to convert that download goal worth 25 points, and also an inquiry goal worth 50 points in the session. The way Sitecore test reporting works, it uses a trailing value per visit metric. And here we're only focused on the goal conversions after a user was exposed to a content test. So in this case, the trailing value per visit of variant B would be 75. The system will ignore anything before the test, and it just focuses on those goal conversions after test exposure. All right, back to test results. You've got the right-hand pane here that updates contextually each time you select an experience. And here we've got the CEO carousel variant that's selected. It shows a screenshot of that experience combination. You've got the conversion rate of the currently selected goal, which is Contact Us. It also shows the trailing value per visit metric we just talked about. And you can actually drill into the top goals that were converted after test exposure. You see each of the goals in your engagement value scale, as well as the amount of conversions, the rate at which those conversions were completed, and also the change. So it compares the conversion rate back to the default variant and shows you the change field. You've got reach, which in this case was 131 for the selected variant. The top clicks to pages. So that's the next page you browse to after being exposed to a test. And finally, site usage metrics. So these are things like bounce rate, duration on page, or page views per visit. We mentioned the change there in any of those metrics. So that's calculated by looking at the default and the new variant and finding the lift or the change between them. In this case, the lift between 23% and 26% is 13. The good news is Sitecore calculates this for you. All right, we've covered a lot of ground with testing, but what about personalization tests? I imagine you guys are familiar with personalization and how Sitecore renders personalization when you set up the rules top down. So if you don't meet the Safari pattern, the system checks to see if you match the family pattern, or if you don't meet either of those, it will check to see if you came from the honeymoon campaign, and finally show you the default. The way a personalization test works is once launched, the system will split traffic between seeing the default or being introduced into personalization. So automatically, half of the traffic is only exposed to the default. And then the system measures conversion rates on goals, and you get that same test result that we looked at there. So in this case, it looks like 2 of the 3 variants outperformed the original. And one key metric that appears in experience optimization reports is the experience effect. So it's just like lift, but instead of comparing conversion rate, it's comparing the trailing value per visit. And again, Sitecore calculates this for you. Here's a customer example from Atlantis's symposium presentation this year. We actually didn't include these results in the 2017 symposium presentation because reach wasn't yet statistically significant. So we kept the test running for a while, but it was aimed at improving the marine and water park confirmation goal on their marine and water park page. And we personalized the hero based on pattern match data and also from some custom data that we've captured in XDB on a booking facet. And we measured the effect of each variant on converting that goal. What we saw was a lift that ranged from 40% to over 100% for each segment that we personalized for. All right, home stretch. We'll take a quick look at organizational considerations and general testing insights before wrapping up. One of the easiest ways to validate that your environment is collecting data and that the testing engine is running as expected is an AA test. Here, you launch a test with two identical versions of a page or of a component, and then measure to make sure that there's no big differences in the reporting. It's a good way to assure stakeholders that the platform works and that data is collecting as anticipated. If you've got active tests on dozens of pages across the site and you have multiple variants of heroes or different components, you can imagine how there could be a real mess for content authors from an organizational perspective. So here's the model that I like to use. For your component types, if you create a folder called Personalization and a folder called A/B tests, you can just keep those right in line with the default data sources. And it's easy to publish all of the personalized data sources at once. It's also easy to find those data sources. Here's another example of it, but this time with a shared repository of data. So again, you've got the default data source, but it's good best practice just to create that A/B test and personalization folder to keep things organized within the content tree. Another initiative rolled out recently by Atlantis the Palm was a daily deal. So each day of the week, they introduce a different version of a new component on the page and use Sitecore's personalization rules to render the daily deal. When the team launched a test, they found that this surf end of the week, the Sunday daily deal, looks like that's for Mexican food. I guess Dubai likes their Mexican food, but that outperformed any of the other variants. You've got 3 of the variants that didn't do so well. So here's a framework that we like to use in the SBOSS team while measuring personalization tests. It's a 2x2 that shows reach and conversions, and the goal is for your test variants to get into that top right box, so with high reach and high conversions. But those 3 days of the week that didn't perform as well, they had high reach, it was low conversions, and that just means it's an opportunity to go back and recraft the content, make sure it's relevant for users. You can improve imagery or call to actions. If you're getting low or zero reach, you may want to go back and check your configuration, make sure everything's published, and even extend the personalization rules, maybe cast a wider net to try to reach a larger audience. A few guiding principles for experience optimization. Collaborate during planning. So there can be some pushback during early program stages, but make sure to invite the key stakeholders to be part of the planning process. This will ensure more of a personal level of investment, and you may want to start with something as simple as that AA test that I described. it's going to make sure everyone trusts the data. And start small. Teams can experiment with anything from imagery to design and copy. But if you identify a few quick experiments and prove your results early, it can really build a case for continued investment in optimization activities. Always start with a hypothesis. Remember to form this hypothesis before you launch the test to clearly identify which goal you're trying to improve and choose those success metrics carefully. And finally, broadcast test launches and the results. So once you've formalized your hypothesis and you click that Start Test button, you could send an email to the entire context marketing team or use maybe a dedicated Slack or Teams channel. But just remember to blast out that the test at launch and then follow up once the test reaches statistical significance. Follow up again with a short description of how the test went. It's also helpful to create like a monthly results sharing meeting where you can talk about the highlights of recent tests and what worked or what didn't. Remember to identify a specific goal as your test objective, and that will help you avoid confirmation bias. It's far too easy to look through data and sift through it and find something that bolsters the opinion that you have at the time. But being data-driven doesn't mean you need to drive around until you find data that supports your opinion, but make sure you're actually measuring against the goal you set out to improve and learn from failed tests to better create new ones. One final parting thought. There's an old joke among A/B test veterans that the free beer button always wins. So as you're testing different elements or components on your site, remember to balance feedback of test results with brand identity. And test existing assumptions. I hope that with what you learned today, you guys become more of an advocate within your organization for using Sitecore to facilitate tests. There are a variety of resources and assets that are available on Sitecore's website. You've got Sitecore Docs and also the Sitecore Partner Network. Thank you for your time today.